And what we'll do in the workshop is we will split into 4 groups, and we will process the discussion from 4 different perspectives. One group will represent the administrative organs of the city. One group will represent private citizens. One group will represent civil organizations, civil society, and one group will represent businesses. And we'll have to have dialogue across the different groups until a consensus is reached on how this problem can be solved. So this will be an experience of putting into practice during the workshop what I'm going to be talking about now. Now, I'd like to give you a very well-structured academic perspective on why things are becoming both more important and more difficult. Good morning to everyone. More difficult in terms of leadership. What we have to consider, what we have to understand, and based on that, also what kind of skills we need. Okay, so that is the focus of this morning's lecture. And then this afternoon, we will actually practice it. Not this afternoon, from 12 to 1:30, we will actually practice it before lunch in our workshop. So I said I'm going to speak slowly because I want to make sure that everybody understands and that there is time to pause and explain in Romanian if something is missed. Because I need everyone to understand so that we can then do it in the workshop. So are there any questions, any need to translate? And please don't feel uncomfortable to just raise your hand if you feel a summary in Romanian would be helpful to you. Are you with me so far? Yeah? Okay. So at any point that you need to interrupt me, please do just raise your hand. If I'm saying too much and we need a little translation. Okay. All right. Wonderful. So as you can see, I have created a little picture. I am not much of an artist, you can tell by my scratches. But I wanted to prepare the ground for our conversation, and then I will show you a much better picture of this representation in color. So, and that will summarize things. And for those of you who want those slides, you can receive them afterwards. Okay? But right now, I will start with this. We heard some very thoughtful perspectives yesterday on the crisis of leadership that we are living in, the lack of good leadership, and even the bishop of this country spoke yesterday about how much there is a crisis of values in leadership and how important values are, both rational and spiritual and humanistic values need to really be reclaimed for good leadership, right? That's where we left off. So what we want to understand now is that as in any other human concept, leadership, love, friendship, justice, our understanding does not stay the same. Our understanding develops, it evolves. And there are actual stages in this developmental evolutionary process. And these stages sometimes bring about significantly new perspectives on the issue at hand. In this case, the issue is leadership. Okay, and so what I want to show you here is a well-established developmental model known as spiral dynamics, and you'll see the chart later in color, which basically described in the 60s and 70s of the 20th century that, in fact, part of the complexity, the growing complexity of the world in which we live, is the fact that different groups bring very different worldviews. You understand worldviews, right? Yeah. Worldviews. Yeah, okay. And so different worldviews, different orientations, and different values. And the larger the society, the more international, the more mixed and diverse, the more you have to understand the worldviews of these different groups and learn to speak across these worldviews, to listen across these worldviews, to see with the eyes of others, and then to make decisions to act as a leader in a way that doesn't divide people and put them against each other, but actually brings different groups in collaboration. Because a successful society, whether it's a Marmuresh country, or the country of Romania, or the Balkan region, or any successful society, depends on the ability of different groups within that society to collaborate, to work together. As soon as there is a lot of divisiveness and clashes in a society, we have violence, we have problems, okay? And so the more complex our societies become, the more diverse, the more we need to understand these different worldviews that are now coming into contact right here in Baia Mare, in Cluj, and anywhere around Romania. These different worldviews are coming into contact, and successful leadership has to work with all of them. So one thing you have to understand is there is an evolutionary sequence here. Okay, so these are earlier stages in the evolution of worldviews, and these are more later stages. But that does not mean that earlier stages are wrong or bad. So this is really important. Every stage in the evolution of human understanding brings strengths. Is that clear? Of course, every perspective also has blind spots, right? These are my blind spots. When I drive, no matter how good a driver I am, a mirror here and a mirror there, there's still a blind spot. There's always a blind spot. So every perspective has strengths and it also has blind spots. So as a leader, you have to be tactful and skillful and understanding how to work with the strengths of different perspectives and be sensitive about the blind spots so that people are not alienated. Is this clear so far? Do we need translation? No. Okay. All right. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the values in each evolutionary perspective, and I'm going to ask you to give me an example. So as you can see in at the dawn of human civilization, the basic worldview was a worldview of survival, right? People had to ensure that they don't go hungry, that the basic instincts for safety, hunger, for connection, for belonging were met. And so those were the central values. And one way to think about values is in a very simple division into these 4 quadrants. What are my values around I? What are my values around we, my group? What are my values about reality? That's it. And what are my values about society? Okay, so this is a very simple representation of what we call the integral approach. The integral approach has various sources and various names that are associated with it in social science. But this particular approach, this way of showing integrality, was developed by Ken Wilber. And he was basically, he has a very complex integral theory. But in his complex integral theory, the central tool, which I find very helpful, is that people have 4 different areas in which they have to make sense of their values. Not 1, 4. Values about me, values about us, values about reality, and values about the community or the society or the nation that I live in, or the world that I live in. Okay? And so when we talk about every worldview, I'm going to ask us to pause for a moment and think what it looks like from the point of view of these 4 perspectives. Okay? So we have the survival worldview. How do you think, and there are still very isolated communities around the world who will show traces of that orientation and particularly bring some of the strengths of that orientation into later worldviews. So what do you think are the strengths of the survival orientation? In terms of I, what do you think the survival worldview understands? I have to eat. I have to eat. I have to meet my instincts. Yes. So these are very central values to I. Okay. I have to be protected. I have to be protected. Yes. Thank you. Security. Security. I have to be safe and secure. Yes. Okay. Anything?
Yeah.
Yes, Lena.
I wanted to share that I know the indigenous peoples of the world that live very isolated from civilization. They have very strong values about the land, the sky. They say, I eat my food from the trees and the plants. I don't go to the store, you know? So it's a different way, very connected to what is in front of them.
So Nina anticipated what I was going into. I was going, no, that's fine. I was just going to say that the I in the survival worldview is not just about my instincts to eat, to be safe, to be connected, but also I am one with my environment. I am one with everything around me. So that is a very powerful strength that the survival worldview brings into later worldviews, that I am one with everything. For me to survive, everything has to survive. The birds, the sky, the waters, everything has to survive together. So that I is very very expansive. It's not well defined. It's very expansive. We could say it's a little bit loose. Okay. Then what would the survival worldview of we be? What do you think? What would be the we here?
Connection with the nature and
I'm sorry?
the connection with the nature.
Connection with
The
nature.
environment,
Okay.
as you mentioned it.
Yeah. And with my clan. Survival does not happen alone. Survival is always in a family or in a clan. So my little group, it could be a family, is the we that has to survive by being also connected to each other and to nature. Okay. What do you think would be the worldview about reality of a survival worldview? How would reality be understood at that early stage in the evolution of collective human consciousness?
It could be defined by religion.
Ooh, beliefs. In that early stage, there were beliefs. I don't know if I would call them religion in the structured way in which we refer to religion, but definitely some beliefs about reality. And those beliefs usually are that there are powerful forces that we have to, that control things and that we fear, and we try to honor these powerful forces in a very fundamental, basic way. Okay? These forces are outside of us, they're powerful forces, and we have fear and we try to abide, and survive. Okay, and what would be the they perspective of this worldview? What do you think? Well, if you think about indigenous tribes, on the one hand, we come back now to their strengths, their sense of connection to nature and to the environment. On the other hand, it is often forgotten that in early survival worldview, anybody who's not part of your immediate group quickly becomes the enemy, a threat.
Fear.
Fear, it's a basic fear of anything that's not we. Anything that's not we is the other that I don't know. I don't know how it's trying to survive, but it's separate from me and I have some fear about it. It can become the enemy. So this is really important because as you can see in this structure, later worldviews integrate earlier worldviews. So this kind of thinking doesn't go away. It is just integrated in larger perspectives. And so, of course, it shows up. It shows up among us, right? And so we need to understand it, and we need to understand how to talk through it and how to work through it. Okay? So do you have questions about this worldview, or can I go forward? Going forward. Okay, so as you can see, with the evolution of life on this planet, small family units combined and formed tribes. Tribes were groups of families, okay? And so the tribal worldview has a bit more of a larger collective perspective. Okay, so what are the values of the tribe? The tribe has its magical beliefs, often very animistic. Okay, and it also values kinship very much, roots to place, to kin, very high values to be protected. And also it worships ancestor connections. Okay. And also traditions. So tribe and family have very strong rootedness in ancestors, in kinship, in tradition, and in magical beliefs around that in a particular place. All right. So do we see the difference here? So I then am not just this separate individual that has to eat and has to stay safe. I am now part of a tribe. I am my place in my tribe. That's who I am. That's what defines me. My place in my tribe. My roots, my place, my role, what I can give to my tribe. Okay. What about the we? Obviously, it's the tribe and the needs of the tribe. What does that mean about the they?
Society.
Well, there's no society in tribal cultures.
Another tribe.
Another tribe, and what would be the relationship to they?
Negotiation.
Well,
Fear in this.
I would say very much fear. I think that's very central, but out of fear, tribes did develop good negotiation skills. Tribal leaders were chosen for one thing, because they were able to represent the needs of the tribe, where the I and the we are completely connected, in such a way that they can negotiate with the needs of another tribe and hopefully avoid war. But if necessary, the leader has to be able to wage war with another tribe to protect the needs of that tribe. Okay, so you see, this is an evolution. It's a more complex perspective, but it also has its own limitations, of course, and strengths. Okay, what do you think is the perspective on reality of the tribal worldview. From what you know about tribal cultures, can you describe how they understand reality? Tribes, what have you read about tribes?
They would be polytheistic.
Polytheistic, so there's many gods, why? What is the function of the different gods?
They could be intermediaries
Ah,
with the outside reality on behalf of the tribe.
excellent, so each tribe has its own polytheistic concept of gods that are the intermediary, thank you so much, Karina, between the needs of the tribe and the powers, the forces of nature. And there are also shamans that are able to serve as healers for the individuals, but also intermediaries with the gods. And so in this worldview, in the tribe and family worldview, the outside world is still a scary collection of forces, but it's a little bit more manageable because there are gods, and if I follow the gods and honor my gods, they will help protect me from forces, so it's a little less scary.
I just wanted to add, so while Elena is describing this, which is so wonderful, begin to think how consciousness has changed from the I to the we to the one, yeah? From fear to love. Begin to imagine that. Yeah?
And maybe we'll get to that a little bit later, because we're not ready to talk about the one yet.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is if you start to look at it, and not as separate, but evolving, yeah, and that you are part of that evolution.
Okay, so let's step back. I like to get into a very gradual approach. We are talking about evolution now, but for the very long time in human evolution, the concept of evolution was not understood. So we don't want to jump the gun too soon. We want to understand how collective human consciousness has evolved very painstakingly. Do you understand painstakingly? Like not easy. This was a collective, slow, difficult process, often very scary. Because if we understand that and don't jump too quickly, then we understand why it is so difficult and scary now too. Because it is difficult and scary now, and leadership requires that kind of understanding. Okay? So now we are gradually evolving to the next worldview, which, as you can see here, is called power politics. So what's characteristic of the power politics worldview? You now have feudal you have feudal communities that have a powerful feudal lord, and then there's the peasants in the community. And so you basically have, for the first time, a very clear, increasingly clear power structure. You know, in the tribes, you have the tribal leader and the shamans, but they were servants of the tribe. Of course, they had more authority, but there was not such a clear hierarchy. That these are more egalitarian social forms. But as we come to structures of power, we are entering into the hierarchical structures of human communities. Okay, and so a central value in power politics, what would you say is the central value?
Competition.
Control, dominance. If you have a power hierarchy, then the question is who dominates the hierarchy? Who has the power to control? Okay, and so the power to control allows you to the power to dominate allows you the power to control how things happen and to protect the safety of yourself and the group by controlling. So dominance is a very central value. Okay, so what are some strengths of power politics? Can you think of some strengths that this worldview actually does bring? Discipline, okay, yes, very good. Anything else? Structure, yes. Order, yep. Okay, what else? Well, in order to dominate, you have to have a lot of courage, right? I mean, you have to rise. There has to be courage. Yesterday, Stephen gave us the example of Genghis Khan, right? I mean, he illustrates what dominance for a certain kind of value actually translated, how it translated into powerful leadership. Risk taking, not afraid of death. You have to be a warrior, right? And of course, you demand respect from others. That's very important. Respect is very central to this kind of dominant structure. Okay. In contemporary society, can you think of groups that illustrate this worldview of power politics? In modern society, what would be an example of that? I would say the army is a more complex structure. It's more like the next level of worldview. But what about organized gangs? Organized gangs have very much this kind of culture where you have a warlord culture. You demand respect, loyalty, or else it's death. I mean, that's just how it works. So that is an example of power politics. What other strengths does power politics bring? I mean, why do we historically celebrate these heroic figures? What do we see in them? We said we see in them courage. What else do we see in them?
They were able to garner resources.
They were able to garner resources. They were very determined, very, I'm sorry?
For the members of the group.
Their powers secured the safety of the others, yes, okay. And you also have to recognize they took a lot of adventure. I mean, they went out into the unknown. So a certain adventurousness is also part of that worldview, willingness to take risks. Okay, so that's also a strength of that worldview. Okay, so one more and then we'll pause to digest and see what that's telling us. As human society evolved, feudal communities started to break down to form larger entities. And during the pre-Renaissance, there was the formation and then the Renaissance of city-states and gradually nations. And here we come into a more complex social organization, right? And it requires a more complex consciousness and idea about leadership. Now you have to coordinate the whole city-state or even a nation, okay? And so, as you can see here, the central values are truth and order, okay? So you gave an example of the army, for example. In the army, there is a certain truth, and the truth is you serve your nation, right? And your authorities, it's a very hierarchical structure, this, and your authorities are the ones in command. And order is maintained how? Law, yeah. Law is understood to represent justice, but does it always represent justice? We don't know, but there's law. Law maintains order, okay? So What are some truths of that kind of worldview? Well, it's very clear here, it's very black and white. Truth is one thing. There's not too many shades. There is a right and there is a wrong, okay? And anybody who embraces that truth is in, and anybody who does not embrace that truth is out or questions that truth. Okay? But that truth also provides stability. That's very important. Stability to the community, right? It also provides a sense of purpose, a sense of morality, a sense of right and wrong. Can you give another example of a modern social structure that represents truth and order? The police, okay. Other modern social structures that you are familiar with that are important in your society as well, that maintain clarity about what's true and also some order and moral clarity. Churches, or more specifically religious institutions, whether it's a church or it's a mosque or it's established religion. What is characteristic of established religion? It has very clear teachings about what's right and also what's wrong. Okay? It's a hierarchical structure. There are authorities which interpret what is right and also what is wrong. There are laws that have to be respected and abided by, and they keep stability in the community. And when you break the laws, what happens? What happens when you break the laws? Punishment. Okay, punishment. So they are punished. We are united by one truth. Those who don't believe that truth or who question that truth or who have shades of a different truth are they. And if our laws are broken, there's punishment. That is the understanding of justice. Punishment through the law. Okay? What else are we missing here? The law and order, the truth and order worldview creates administrative structures. For the first time, there are forms of governance, right? There are governing structures, there's the police, there's army, there's church, these are just all administrative structures that govern a complex society. Yes, they govern with very clear laws and punishment, but they are more complex structures. Okay, so you see human consciousness is expanding, it's developing, it's learning to do more complex things, keep a whole society stable, right? Which is a big task. And so rule-based bureaucracy is very characteristic here. Rule-based bureaucracy. There are rules in church, there are rules in the army, there's rules in the police, there's rules in educational institutions, there's rules. And the bureaucracies work on rules. Okay. And also there is a strong feeling of loyalty that is now translated into loyalty to the nation, loyalty to the church, loyalty to the army, patriotism. Okay, these are values that this perspective brings. Discipline, yes, discipline from here to here is to a much higher level. More complex discipline. If you work within a bureaucracy, your discipline is different than if you work in a gang, right? Much more complicated discipline. Okay, so you can see this evolutionary process, and it is not easy. And so in order to summarize these first 4 stages, before we go on, I'd like to invite us to think in terms of these 5 concepts. The self, okay, the other or others, could be both here what is success, what is justice, and nature. We've kind of said these things already, but let's say, what is the evolutionary process of the self here? What is characteristic of the self in all of these four worldviews? Is there anything that you notice? You kept mentioning the word fear, and you kept talking about the safety, security, protection based on fear, which means that in these four worldviews, the self perceives itself as separate. I am separate from everything around me, so I'm kind of small, I'm vulnerable, I am scared, I need a tribe, I need a group, I need a gang, I need a country, I need an institution to protect me because I'm separate. So the self is separate. What about the others? In all of these worldviews, how do we relate to others? If you feel separate, if you feel vulnerable, then how do you perceive others?
Maybe a danger.
A possible threat. A possible threat. If you can, I'm sorry?
Unknown.
Unknown.
Right.
Yes, exactly. So unknown and therefore maybe a threat. If you can, you try to negotiate, but you definitely are competing. Okay, you're competing because that other thing, I don't know what it is, and I want to compete for my safety. So competition is also very characteristic in these four worldviews. Okay, competition with regards to others. What about success? How is success understood in these four worldviews? In order to meet my instincts, in order to protect my tribe, in order to be loyal to my gang, in order to be loyal to my country or my church or my institution or my army, what does then success translate into? What does it mean to be successful?
It means to survive, it means to connect, it means to thrive. So it's a kind of engine.
It is a kind of energy. What is the main value towards which this energy is oriented in conditions where the self is separate and the other is an unknown potential threat? What is the main energy oriented towards? Any thoughts?
Be disciplined.
What is the purpose of discipline? What are you trying to do?
Okay.
To respect the rules, to control.
You're trying to control. If you're working out of fear, you have to control. Success is how well you can control anything that is a threat to you. Right? So success involves control. Very important. Now, it may be soft glove control. It may be hard force control. It may be manipulative control. But if you feel separate and vulnerable, you will try to control your environment. If you believe that your faith tradition is endangered by faith tradition, you will try to control people to stay within your faith tradition and to keep those others out. That's also a form of control, right? That's just an example. Every institution tries to control at this level and below. Okay, so success is in terms of control. Justice. If success is control, then what does justice translate into? Punishment. If I have to control the other, the threats, then I create parameters, rules, and anybody who steps outside of these rules, there's a punishment. That's justice then means punishment. Okay? And nature, what has been the attitude to nature? We said here there was a lot of connection to nature. The attitude to nature really changed from tribe and family to power politics and then to nation. how did the attitude to nature change? We said the early worldviews were very connected to nature. So nature became a resource. Yes, thank you. And so what do we do with that resource? Manage it. Extract. We extract resources from nature. So the attitude to nature becomes extractive. For those of you who don't know this term, it is extractive. Extractive approach to nature. Nature is there to give me, for me to take those resources from.
us.
Okay, so you can see that there are a lot of commonalities between these early worldviews in terms of these central 5 categories of human life, right? Self, other, success, justice, and nature. These are central issues in our lives. Okay, let's look at one more worldview, and then we will see what happens after that. As you can see, the next one, strategic enterprise, we associate the emergence of this worldview with modern capitalism. In modern capitalism, there is a whole new entity aside from the state, the church, the army. What is that entity? I'm sorry? Business. Business. Structured business for profit, yes. So capitalism creates a whole new structure. The concept of succeeding goes to a whole different level. Now you succeed by creating a new complex structure. Until now, you knew how to do governance structures, maybe armies. Now you create businesses, and they can get bigger and bigger and therefore become more complex structures. And so that's now a strategic enterprise, the purpose of which is to succeed, right? For profit. It's all profit driven, but it's also what is a good quality of that worldview. If you want to create a business that is successful and profitable, what do you need?
Resource.
You need resources. Yes. What else do you need? Let's keep thinking.
Product.
What kind of capacity? My question wasn't clear.
Leading.
Leading, managing, okay, leading, managing resources, managing other people. Other, what else do I need?
Human capital.
In terms of capacities, it is leading and managing human capital and resources. What else is a capacity in a successful business?
Also control.
Certainly there's a need for control that continues. It's not a new skill, but friends, think for a moment. Let's slow down and really listen and think. We're talking about the evolution at each next stage of some new strengths. Creativity, and we call it entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship. Now you have to think creatively, but not in a small scale, magical thinking. You have to think
What others need.
yes, what others need, what I need, how are we going to strategize in this complex structure? How do I create the kind of enterprise where everybody has an interest and so there's profit? That is called entrepreneurship. That is a whole new level of skills. And for those of us who are old enough to remember the Balkans before 1990, we know that in these societies here in the Balkans that were referred to as communist societies, they were, you can refer to them by different names, but in any case, in those societies, entrepreneurship was not allowed, not encouraged, not even possible. It was not, there was no law for entrepreneurship. So things really, really stopped here, and it was clearly no room for enterprise. And then after 1990, our societies started to experience the the turbulence, the rapid turbulence of now the possibility to become entrepreneurs, to build businesses. And with that, the movement to strategic enterprise had both strengths, a lot of creative entrepreneurial businesses, new possibilities, more products on the market, more resources, but also what were some of its downsides? What are some of the downsides of this worldview of entrepreneurship for profit? What do you think now? This is close to home. Give it some thought. The negative side. The negative side, the less nice side of it.
Corruption.
Corruption, okay. Greed, thank you, greed. Okay, so now it's not so much about truth anymore. It's about pragmatics. It's about profit. Truth can go out the window. Truth can become convenient or inconvenient or this or that, but it's about profit. It's about greed. It's a very pragmatic mentality. It can be very utilitarian, and there is another one. Please don't change. What is the word? I'm sorry. Transactional. That's it. Thank you. Transactional. Yes, friends. Thank you. Okay, so in capitalism, relationships become very transactional. And there is really a shift. The self is still separate, very much separate. It is competing with others, still competing. Okay, so this here, separate self competing with the others. Okay, success. Who can control the profits? So it's still control, but profit-driven control, right? What about justice? That is a bit of a difference in justice here. What is the change in concepts of justice? And think about big businesses. How do they think of corporate business? What were the panelists speaking about yesterday? What was your Abbott talking about the loss of values? What happens in justice in
Everything is possible.
as long as you can buy, yeah, money can buy you justice. Money can buy you a check mark that you're within the law. You can use your power to create lobbies that lobby to create laws that are convenient for your business. Think about the United States, everything is lobbies, and lobbies rule basically and create the laws, and there's lobbies in pharmacy and in everything. It's absolutely, so that justice becomes how do I manipulate things successfully, so I can only to my own interest and the interest of profit. Interest of profit, and I can buy the law. So there's no longer the black and white clear cut right and wrong. And that's what your Abbott was talking about yesterday. He was saying everything has gone out the window. There's no right and wrong anymore. There's no morality. There's no faith. There's no this. There's no that. It's just a lot of corruption. Okay. But what are you noticing in what I'm saying? Am I saying that this, on the one hand, I'm saying this is an evolution, it's a more complex consciousness. On the other hand, I'm saying it's actually quite ugly and corrupt. So which way is it now? What am I really saying? Is this evolution? Is this devolution? What is it? What am I saying here? Where is the dilemma we're facing?
It's been different because it could increase productivity in order to feed much more people, in order to offer a certain standard of life for more population than before. So it's the scale is just from
Greater.
small things to 8 billion possible.
Right. So clearly it is a progress in consciousness because it is capable in terms of capabilities to deal with much greater complexity. Right? Now that's not a small thing. Those are a whole new level of skills. Not I can't be an entrepreneur for my life. I wouldn't know where to begin. Right? So it takes a certain quality, certain skills of entrepreneurship. These are strengths. Okay. So for example, in 2014, the world came together to establish a set of new goals at the level of the United Nations. Have you heard of Agenda 2030 of the United Nations? Yes, you have. I see you nodding. And that agenda boils down to, do you know what? What was established in Agenda 2030? Do you remember? Sustainable Development SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals were established. Sustainable Development Goals. What does that mean? Representatives of every part of the world came together and they said, we have so much know-how, so much entrepreneurial skill and knowledge and capacity now. We should be able to feed the world's population and eliminate poverty. That is one of the 17 goals, to eliminate poverty. Why? Because now we have the capacities that go with this more complex worldview, the skills, the knowledge, the know-how. So we have to develop a process to do that. That was a sustainable development goal, to eliminate poverty. Another sustainable development goal was, we now understand that business depends on natural resources. And if it depends on natural resources, then we have to manage these natural resources wisely. Well, we cannot just grab and extract. We have to steward these resources. So that the idea of stewardship emerged. Stewarding resources. Okay, that's a somewhat different relationship to nature here. At the largest scale, we have to steward resources. We have to be wise. That's an SDG. One SDG is how to steward resources underwater. Another one is how to steward resources on Earth. And there's water is a separate one. Anyway, you can look at this 17 SDGs, but they build on strategic corporate business. But you notice that they actually hold a different value. What is the very different value in these 17 SDGs? What do you hear me talking about? Stewarding resources, eliminating poverty, making life in the world.
Care about all the ones.
Yes. Wow, that's a whole shift of worldview. Now I am not driven by my profit. I am driven by a central value, which is a humanistic value. It is a humanistic value to eliminate poverty. It is a humanistic value to use resources on the planet in such a way that everybody is taken care of, and maybe even 7 generations ahead.
Yes, but I have a question. Last statement I said, if that was really on the purpose of the whole world, or was it only on purpose of certain group of people?
Very, very good question. Thank you for asking. Sorry. Thank you for asking this question, Romeo. Yes. Notice that the group whose interest we are focused on keeps expanding. Does it cover everyone? It's wider, but it's not everyone. Okay, that is the evolutionary process. I cannot jump from I to all the world. That's why I was saying earlier, let's slow down. I, my tribe, then my nation, my church, my army, then my business. But then I'm starting to realize that my business depends on many different people and a lot of different resources in the world. So it gets more complex. Maybe I need global governance. Ooh, it gets more complicated. Like who has a say in global governance, right? I mean, it's an evolutionary process. But friends, you notice here a very firm line. Why am I putting here this firm line? Do you have any idea? It definitely is, but it's a new leadership at every stage. What is particularly different about this kind of leadership? I'm sorry, one at a time. Roger? A new level, yes, it is a new level. But again, every level is, well, no, stage. These are different stages, and that's a new level. Okay, what's the difference between a stage and a level? Now, that's a lot of conceptual thinking, but it's very important. Friends, yes, please.
Maybe it somehow this understanding of the self kind of shifted. Yes, from the separate self to so more encompassing.
Stay with us.
More connected, the interdependence that we have.
So notice all of these exhibit a qualitative shift at this level. In each next stage, the self is a little more connected to larger groups. But here, the self is already connected beyond what it can see, beyond what it can encompass. It is a very abstract realization of I may not see people on the other side of the planet. I depend on what happens to them. Okay, so I am a part of a we that encompasses people that I have no idea about. But they're still part, that's a huge cognitive leap. That's the difference in this shift. We call it a paradigm shift. And so, hear this. We are actually now in the middle of this very paradigm shift. And that's why things are so difficult. Because it gets very abstract. Again, I keep referring to your abbot yesterday because he gave us some very good examples. One of the things he said was globalism versus globalization. That was an interesting example he was referring to. He was saying globalization is this. We know now that we are dependent on people all over the planet and resources and life all over the planet. That's the globalizing understanding. Globalism maybe is used sometimes, often in a negative way to mean that when you think about the planet, you no longer recognize the diversity. Everything gets subject to the same understanding. And so there's some kind of a unification that does not honor diversity of groups, diversity of cultures. And so people are very sensitive at this transition right now. All of us are. And you will be as leaders meeting and working with other people who are very sensitive to both make decisions that reflect this paradigm shift and work for everyone, but at the same time honor the diversity of cultures and groups and roots that are part of the decision-making process. And that is not easy. That is not easy. Now, it's a paradigm shift because all 5 concepts change here. You saw here, there was a change of 1 or 2 concepts gradually. But here, we have a real leap. How is every concept changing? The self is no longer separate. Scientific knowledge tells us that we are completely interconnected. I may look very separate from you, but the fact of the matter is, everything I do will impact you and vice versa. Sure. We are very interconnected. So the self becomes interdependent. That is a huge shift. For the first time, the self becomes interdependent. Okay? Then the other. If I am dependent on all of you for my well-being, do I want to compete with you? Or what do I want to do with you?
I want to know you. I'm interested of.
Yes, I'm interested in understanding and knowing you. Yes. And what do I collaborate? Yes, I want to collaborate. I don't want to compete so much because I understand that if everybody is happy, I'm happy. So it's a win-win.
I want to say win-win collaboration.
Thank you. Sorry, win-win collaboration. Here it's kind of win-lose. In strategic enterprise, there's winners and losers. I forgot to say that. That's very characteristic in capitalism. And in many of our societies, Bulgaria, Romania, we, as business is developing, we still think about who's successful and who's a loser, right? That's strategic enterprise. But when we understand that we're all interdependent, then if there are many losers in this society, sooner or later, I will be a loser too, because there'll be unrest, there will be violence, there will be crime, there will be unhealth, and that will affect me. Now, I'm starting to think, oh, it's not about winners and losers, it's about winners and winners. How do we find win-win solutions? That is a huge shift. The self and the other are leaping forward in understanding now. And then success, of course, used to be control until now. And if we're interdependent, then when am I living successfully? When am I living successfully if we are interdependent?
If I am happy and you are happy.
All right, and I ensure that by being connected. How do I ensure your happiness? I have to be connected. We talk about, I mean, even here we talk about networking, but here we talk about connecting to each other. You know, yesterday we put a lot of time into connecting the hearts, connecting the souls, connecting our perspectives, and we'll come back to that in the workshop now. Connection is what brings success. The more connected we are, the more we can work together, the more successful the planet is for everyone. Sir?
I mean, success could be also when I understand what you have, what you need, and I value also what you have, and then we together decide on how can we collaborate in a win-win situation.
Beautiful example. Beautiful example. And that's exactly what we're going to practice in the workshop. We choose an issue, and you guys are going to have that conversation. How do you understand each other and value and make decisions? So you see, friends, and then also what is the change in justice? If we are interdependent, if success is about connection, about feeling connected to each other, if through collaboration, then what becomes the goal of and the method of justice? Is it still punishment?
No.
If it's not punishment, what is it?
Communication.
Yeah. Better communication, better understanding. I want to understand why you did that. You were needing something, looking for something, wanting something. I need to understand. Why do I want to understand? Because I want to restore the connection. I want to restore the health of my community. So justice here becomes restorative. So this is collaboration. This is a huge shift. Collaboration I am. What did we say about others and the self? Interconnected. This was collaboration here, and this was connection. Oh, no, connectedness. Okay? And what is the shift? Sorry, it became very scratchy, but now you're seeing the change. What is the shift in the relationship to nature? Am I still extracting from nature? What is the term here that you see? Stewardship. Nature is valued, appreciated, and stewarded. Stewardship. What is to be a steward? What does it mean to be a steward? Taking care of, serving, honoring, taking care of. So nature serves us, we serve and honor nature, we take care of it. So it's a completely different attitude. So you can see why we're talking about a change of levels. This is a leap, this is level 1, and this is level 2. Does that mean that level 1 is bad? No. It has lots of strengths. But level 2 is more complex because it has to deal with our whole planet, and we cannot avoid it now. Your business, your communications, your health, everything depends on planetary processes. So we have to shift towards this humanistic egalitarian worldview. And what is characteristic of the humanistic egalitarian worldview? It is people-focused. You notice here, we're looking at each other, we're connecting with each other, we are listening to each other. It's very people-focused. This is profit-focused, this is people-focused, right? Also, it is, as we said, very restorative in terms of connections and nature. So in the humanistic egalitarian worldview, people try to restore human connection, which is very broken here in the strategic enterprise. We try to really create healthy societies, healthy communities, healthy organizations. We try to heal the broken connections of capitalism with a greater understanding. So that's very, very important. There is also an emphasis on social justice. You heard that. Elimination of poverty, stewarding resources, equal distribution for everyone. That's social justice, right? My focus now is also on social justice and human rights. I recognize that every person is human and every person has a right to have their human needs and dignity protected, right? That is human rights. And you know that after the Second World War, we saw the beginnings of this evolution of thinking. People came together, they created the United Nations, the Bill of Human Rights, eventually other bills about the rights of children, the rights of the environment are underway right now. There's all kinds of global governance processes and agreements, evolving agreements, and that's what Nina was inviting you to, another stage in that process in New York in December, because we now know we have to work as a planet. If there is another war, the whole planet will be affected, okay? And so we know we have to work at this level. And even though we often say, oh, let the United Nations figure this out, I got to figure out my survival here. It actually doesn't work because my choices every step of the way are either from here or from other places. And that's where we will come now into skills. So you see, this is a difficult time because we have to rethink everything. We have to rethink what is power, what is success, what is purpose, life purpose. Our central values are now collective humanistic, not just my tribe, my country, my church, my group, right? collective humanistic values. We embrace the diversity. With that, we embrace a lot of complexity too. Okay. And so now, if you would please kindly, Samuel, show us on the big screen the chart that I was working from, so you can actually see this colorful complexity. And our friends online can do too. Are they online today? Oh, wonderful. Okay. Oh, it's not showing yet?
It will come.
Okay, thank you. So obviously, this chart of spiral dynamics that you just saw now, you are welcome to have this slide. I didn't invent this, as I said to you. That was actually, this whole understanding was the data behind this understanding was gathered by Clare Graves, actually. Clare Graves, the initial researcher, actually was afflicted and passed away before he could summarize his data fully. And so Don Beck took his data, analyzed it, summarized it, and then there's been multiple interpretations of that, known as spiral dynamics. And here you have a way of interpreting it by Ben Levi. But you can find on the internet, if you type spiral dynamics stages and levels, you can find different color coding. Some are pretty universal. The red for power, the blue for law and order are pretty standard, but some of the others change, but that doesn't matter. What's really important is that we are living in a time of shift from level 1 to level 2, and I cannot pause enough on that, because that makes you understand why there is so much turbulence. Yesterday, some colleagues were asking, and we couldn't, I said we were going to address that today. Some colleagues were asking, why are we not talking about the push to fascist ideologies again? Well, you know, these are big changes. People are really scared and they're going back. No, I don't want this global stuff. I want a strong person taking care of my country and my tribe. Let's go back to safety. That's what's happening here. It's difficult. Of course, there's going to be a retreat, because let me tell you, after 35 years of doing clinical work and accompanying people in stages of growth, because these are collective stages of growth, but we go through comparable stages individually, I have to tell you, this leap is very scary. It's difficult. It's difficult. And people get very defensive. Are you telling me that my truth is not a truth anymore? Are you relativizing my truth? No, I'm not relativizing your truth. I am just saying that none of us have access to absolute truth. That's different. I'm not saying there isn't absolute truth. I'm just saying that your understanding and mine is relative. Yeah.
I think you're wonderful. Really helpful. And I think consciousness now, the human being has consciousness, and it is constantly evolving, and each generation has that more and more, that understanding. So begin to think, not only are we stewards, but now we are understanding we are part of nature. We're not in charge of nature, but we come with a consciousness, and eventually we will see the whole. The whole is what we begin to understand. So when we have conflicts, we don't go this way for compromise and tolerance. We go from above, and we see that we all have the same needs, the same dreams, the same desires. And we don't know how yet to build it, to create a unified force field, but we are working on it, and we can use our consciousness for that.
So friends, what Nina is saying is very important, because if you noticed, after the green humanistic egalitarian, there were two more color codes. One is integral ecological and one is global holistic. So consciousness does not stop evolving at humanistic egalitarian. First, you understand that we are all interdependent. Then you start to understand what she just said. Gradually, some of us, not everyone, but that's okay, start to understand that not only am I having to steward nature, but I'm really a part of nature, and my wholeness and the natural wholeness are interconnected. Now I'm getting into the ecological worldview. I wasn't even speaking about it because these are higher order developments. This is the difficult shift, and that's why you need to, as leaders, really understand how to work with this shift. And from here on, it gets nicer and nicer because as my consciousness expands, I understand why I need to recycle, why it makes sense to be vegetarian, possibly even vegan. All kinds of other things start to make sense, and we become increasingly collaborative as we see the bigger wholeness. And of course, with global holistic perspective, what is holistic? I see the whole. That's what Nina was talking about. This is advanced evolution. That is the direction in which we're headed, but it's not necessarily where the most difficult work is. The most difficult work is right here. And so for the last 15 minutes of this lecture, I want to now focus on the skills that help us negotiate with different groups so that we can bring together the strengths of tribal roots and traditions, the strength of discipline and power and control, the strength of moral clarity and abiding by law, also the strength of entrepreneurial thinking, creative entrepreneurial thinking. We somehow have to have conversations that bring to the table all these strengths, but from the point of view of, and that's leadership in this age, that's different than leadership here or leadership here. Very, very, very different. That's why we're having this workshop, because that's the kind of leadership we're talking about. And it sounds nice and wishy-washy until you look at this evolution and you see, oh, it's not wishy-washy. It's a very complex process. And so this leadership here is what you are invited to contemplate in your area of practice, whether you're a lawyer, whether you're a teacher, working with serving diverse communities, whether you're a university administrator, whether you're a public administrator of some kind, or doctor. Doctors will have to work with patients who have all kinds of different worldviews and practices, holistic health practices. Do you just tell them, no, that's nonsense, you just take your pills? They're not going to come back to you. So whatever your field of practice, this is where emergent leadership is. That's why Nina is organizing this event. That's why you're encouraged to apply so that you can be in a community of people, in a global community of people where you can learn more about this kind of leadership and some of the skills that are involved. Now we're going to shift gears and talk about skills for the last 15 minutes. You wanted to mention something.
And that is why when we talked about consciousness of going inside, so you do not identify with what you see on the outside, but you begin to create an understanding of what is emerging, what is coming, and how do you relate to that. Yeah, and that you can do with meditation and imagining.
So it's very important to understand that in humanistic, egalitarian-oriented leadership, you have to use equally the powers of the mind and the powers of the heart and the soul. Mind has to understand all these things, and it has to understand what the skills across them look like and the strengths. That is a very analytical understanding that we're doing right now. But at the same time, because it's so complex, you have to go inward, you have to center. Once the mind understands, it also needs to quiet so that you can hear with your heart and soul. Actually, from psychology, I can tell you that advanced psychological understanding of mind is very different than what you and I often call mind. When we say mind, we mean the brain. We mean this, right? Well, no. The Mindsight Institute in California, psychiatrist Daniel Siegel and his interdisciplinary team did some very significant research on the transdisciplinary research on the nature of mind. Why? Because Daniel Siegel came out of psychiatric medical school and he said, I've learned everything about every aspect of an unhealthy mind. I've learned every diagnostic of unhealth. The one thing I don't know is what is mind? What is mind? Right? And so he gathered this transdisciplinary team and created the Mindsight Institute in Berkeley, California. And they researched and debated and discussed and consulted, and they came out with a definition of mind, which I want to share. I will repeat it several times so you can write it down because it's phenomenal. Mind is the embodied and interpersonal process of sharing information and energy. Energy and information. Mind is the embodied and interpersonal flow, actually. The embodied and interpersonal flow of energy and information. That's the succinct summary. Now, friends, notice, not the enskulled, the embodied. That means the brain, that means the heart, that means I feel and I know with my whole body all kinds of things that my brain may not be registering. And that's where these early worldviews were very strong. They knew with their body, they knew with their intuition, they knew with their soul. Maybe analytically, their thinking was not so advanced. But as our analytical thinking advanced here, we disconnected from our bodies, we disconnected from our hearts, we disconnected from our intuition. And so here we are moving towards embodied. So brain, heart, body, liquids, intuition, field, and it's all not the static understanding of intelligence of the 20th century. He's intelligent, she's not. No such thing. Intelligence is a flow process. Our intelligence goes up and down, Nina and I know it, you know. When we're tired and underslept, we feel like, I don't know what I'm doing. What am I doing here? I've got no intelligence right now. There's no flow, okay? But then somehow we center, and then the heart and the mind and the body get aligned with the assistance of the universe, and flow happens. And that's what happened to me this morning. I woke up dizzy. I've had vertigo for 3 days in a row. I cannot sleep. I'm not functioning well, not feeling well. So this morning I was praying and meditating and just asking, please help me get into flow. Just help me get into flow. If I can get into flow, I know the knowledge that is here somewhere will come to me and it will translate into meaningful explanations and my heart will work and it will all. And it did, but not because I had it all right here. I was not well. My intelligence was up and down quite a bit this morning. But this intelligence, your presence, the way you're looking at me, the way you're exuding understanding and being with me in this process, this is an interpersonal flow. It's not just happening here. It's happening here and here and here, and with the people online that we're not seeing their faces. And so through me is flowing what I need to offer you right now. That doesn't mean that my intelligence in an hour from now is going to be equally clear. I may flop. Hopefully I'll flop after 1:30. That's the goal. But there's no guarantee, right? So that's what we mean by mind. It's a much bigger process. And so you see, even in the understanding of self and mind, there is a huge shift, paradigmatic shift, change in levels, as Roger said. That is not just the somewhat different definition, that is the leap in levels. You know, up to here, mind was the brain. In these stages here, mind was brain. We had brain science, psychology was about behavior, but now I'm talking to you about a psychology that is integral, that is holistic, that does not separate the brain from the soul and the heart. and the body and the interpersonal space that works with that whole complexity, because that's who we are. We're complex. We're not just the brain. Right? And that's the only way we're going to really solve our problems. Okay? So that is a big leap. In order to negotiate this leap, we're going to go to the next and last slide now and look at the 4 areas of skills. So you see, and all of you who want can leave your email here at the end of this lecture, and I will happily forward you the slides. If you leave me your email right here, you can write your email and you'll get the slides. So I know it doesn't work well on a camera picture, but if you send me an email, I will forward it.
I have all the emails. I'll send it to you.
Ah,
I have
okay.
everybody's email.
Perfect. Yeah, so you can share them with me. Perfect. So now you can follow this and don't have to write because you will get it. Okay. So these are the 4 integral quadrants that we started with. And there are skills that a leader, a humanistic egalitarian leader, has to develop in each quadrant.
That's the one. That's the next step.
Yes, that is our work right now. At this point in time, that's why we're in this workshop, so we can get clear. What are my challenges? And for each of us, the challenges are going to be a little different because each of us is a little more comfortable with certain quadrants than others, but we each have to take stock. Where do I see my challenges and how do I need to work to become a better leader, developing skills? So let me talk a little bit about the skills in the different, oh gosh, we're out of time already. I will go until 12 if that's okay, and then we'll develop.
Take a break. Yeah.
So the intrapersonal skills, the skills of the I, the intrapersonal skills. Friends, until here, not a lot of reflection was required. I didn't have to turn inward a whole lot. I mean, when I pray, hopefully I please God, but what do I know if I please him or not? I know I try to abide by the laws. I try to be a good person. I try to be kind. I know I'm not always kind. I ask for forgiveness. That's the level of self-reflection. But now I have to be aware of how I show up as a leader in every moment. What am I embodying? Am I embodying power and control? Am I embodying tribal allegiances? Am I embodying humanitarian values? Not just what I'm saying, but what am my presence embodying? I can't fool you. It doesn't matter what I tell you. You can read me. Of course you read me. We all read each other. So what we say is what we say, but what we see is what we read. Okay? And so, in order to really show up and embody the value out of which you're trying to be a leader, you need to be self-aware in every moment. That's a lot of self-reflection. Self-reflection goes to a whole new level. That's why we're talking about meditation, quiet time. People practice yoga, qigong, tai chi, various practices, prayer and meditation, of course, are very central to self-reflection. It is not so I can beat myself that I wasn't a good person. It's more like, ooh, I worked out my strength here today, and here I retreated into some defensiveness. Okay, maybe tomorrow I can do better. Okay, that's self-reflection. It's not beating myself up. It's just being with me in my process of showing up as a leader, being kind to myself and kind to all of you and truthful as well. Okay, so that's self-awareness. Then, of course, there's the mental discipline to be aware. That's why we now, in all kinds of individual and collective healing practices, insist on meditation, because meditation builds mental discipline. It builds the ability. One part of my mind is there observing what the rest of my mind is doing. So a part of my mind is thinking about what I'm telling you. Another part of me is observing how I'm showing up as I'm talking to you. That's mindfulness. which is very important, and spiritual susceptibility. What is spiritual susceptibility? It is my sensitivity to what is whole, spiritually whole, and what may be fake, what may be divisive, even if it claims truth. So that's the third eye. That's what, when we close our outer eye and we open our inner eye that turns inward, and we pray and we meditate and we take stock, the third eye opens. It's not a metaphor. That's the prefrontal cortex. The third eye is the so-called PFC, prefrontal cortex. And the prefrontal cortex is not biologically mature in people until age 25. It's the latest brain structure. But even when it's biologically mature, that doesn't mean it's active. There's lots of adults walking around with a mature prefrontal cortex that is not engaged a whole lot. It's kind of gray on MRIs. We have MRI studies that show this. But when I engage my prefrontal cortex, which I close my outer eyes, open that inner eye that Indians have that dot here, I am able to become more mindful of how I show up, be able to self-regulate, okay? And that means that my choices of actions and language will be more mindful. There are things I will be aware not to say because they can be hurtful to another group or disrespectful to another group. My language will become much more mindful. I'll give you an example. When before I left Bulgaria, it was common in the language around me and in my own language to say, oh, this is so idiotic. What an idiot. He's an idiot. She's an idiot. I'm an idiot. I can't believe I forgot. Idiot, idiot, idiot. He was everywhere. He was everywhere. And then as I went into my doctoral studies and in this whole different environment and my own evolutionary process intensified, I realized, oh my God, what a horrible word. What am I referring to? I am basically saying that people who have a different intelligence than my own are lesser quality, and I use them as a name. Okay? That is really mindless language. And so I can't say that anymore. But it flies all around me. I'm back in Bulgaria and there's all idiots all around. And every so often I say, oh, idiot, why did you cut me? And then I'm like, oh, idiot, damn it. I just started to go back into that thinking again because mindful choice and mindful language are an ongoing process. It's not like, done deal. I thought about it. I'm done. I'm all good. No, it's moment by moment, moment by moment. And then
I was gonna say, one of the greatest gifts for me was the idea that truth, you know how hard it is to determine what is truth nowadays, yeah? With internet, social media, AI. But if you go inside and you understand your truth, you live by your truth, and then you can identify what has meaning to you on the outside. So it's a freedom, you know, to not always be so concerned, but to understand you have your own truth.
thank you. Yes. So maybe, friends, what we will do is we will leave this slide on and I will walk you through the rest of it when we come back from our coffee break.
Yeah.
And because we have a coffee break and then we're going to have the workshop until 1:30, I'll walk you through the skills and then we will break into groups. Please be thinking about what kind of problem you'd like to consult on. I will walk you through the skills, then I will explain consultation, and then you will break into 4 groups and deal with one city issue, whatever you decide. Okay, but there's going to be 4 groups. There's going to be people who are citizens, people who are civil social organizations, people who are local government, and people who are business. Okay, let's have a 15-minute break. Do we have any information about where we're going to break?
I think group, wherever we were, group 10. Yes.
All good.
All right, online folks, we are taking a 15 minutes break, and so we will be right back after 15 minutes break. Thank you.
In level 1 and level 2, which is very dramatic, which requires a whole expansion of skills from everything that we have developed here to a whole new set. We're going to look at these skills now, and then we're going to practice them. So, a little bit. We'll practice them a little bit. Okay, so we spoke about intrapersonal skills like self-awareness, mental discipline and spiritual susceptibility, and mindful choice and language. This is the skills of personality integration, and personality integration. I'm sorry? I just hope people will. No, I just hope other people will be okay with coming in.
Yeah, they can open it up.
Okay. Okay. All right. So in addition to skills for personality integration through the law of love, which is I understand and love the human family. Although I am one segment of that human family, I have care for the whole human family, and I want to operate in a spirit of love and connection. Okay, that's the intrapersonal integration, right? We also have interpersonal development of spiritually mature relationships and culture. What does spiritual maturity of relationship and culture actually mean? So you want to notice the skills here, because you will be practicing some of them very shortly. Deep listening to one another. Deep listening. Friends, most of us have no idea how to deep listen. I need to say that up front. That is not attentive listening. In your attentive listening, you got all kinds of conversations going on in your head, and you're trying to pay attention while your brain is working.
Yeah.
Yes, we listen, but we don't hear, maybe. Whatever. Deep listening means that you learn to quiet your mind. If you cannot quiet your mind, you cannot really hear the perspective of the other. So deep listening involves a quiet mind. That means intrapersonal practices to quiet your mind, so that when I listen to you, I'm aware when I am really present for you and when I get distracted. And then I come back to presence to you, and then I get distracted again, and then I come back again, okay? That's human. But deep listening with an open heart and an open mind.
I think what it is you're already thinking of what you're going to say to the person, rather than really feeling them and understanding them.
Very true, very true. Usually we listen and we're preparing our speech, yes. Okay, it's also, deep listening involves openness to different perspectives, understanding, I don't know where you're coming from, but wherever you're coming from, you probably bring strengths, because there's strengths everywhere. So I really want to listen to hear what strengths you're bringing to the table, because I'd like to work with you, right? And then consultative skills. This is very important, because you're going to try consultation now. Friends, the concept of consultation is relatively new. Most people haven't really understood what consultation is, and it is different than conversation or debate. Consultation was a skill that was in very limited environments practiced by Native Americans and other indigenous groups around the world, where you've heard them pass around the talking stick. What happens when people in a circle pass around the talking stick, the one who holds the talking stick is not interrupted, there's no engagement with them, there's just deep listening, and they are with a quiet mind from a centered place unfolding what they have to put forth. And then the circle continues, people build, engage, add, but it's very detached. You're not from spiritual detachment from ego. That's consultation. I'm not trying to promote my view and become a leader right away in the group in this way of leadership here, as in power and control or dominance. I am really trying to be detached from my own strong opinions and self. As a psychologist, I often tell my clients, if you really feel the urge to do something or say something, use all your power to pull yourself mentally back and open space before you and your urge. And breathe. Breathe. And when you feel really at ease, if there's something that still needs to be said, then say it. But breathe first and pull back. So openness and detachment from strong personal views and understanding that the consultation is in a way a circular process, and whatever we reach as a final outcome is not going to be my view or your view or his or her view. It's going to be collective. It will organically emerge from the circle process. It will be synergistic. It will be bigger than the individuals. That's why consultation is a profoundly spiritual practice. It is an act of love, an act of connection, an act of honoring life and each other. And it's very powerful decision-making, interpersonal decision-making.
So two things that I want to share is that I've spent time with indigenous chiefs, yes. And what I've learned from them is they don't speak unless they see the picture in their mind first. So it's really, when you have something to say, it's because you've integrated a thought. And so many of us talk to hear what we think, which is very linear. Theirs is more circular. Plus, there's a wonderful technique called sociocracy, which is a way of doing circle agreements. And what you say is, I agree to disagree, but I am willing to go with this. And that allows you to hear other people's opinion. And if you don't like an opinion, you can ask to make an amendment. But you don't clash, you build, and it's very different. So
This is very key. You don't clash, you build. You make amendments and you build. So that's consultative skills that are oriented towards serving a shared need, a shared cause, a shared problem.
I was asked to write the word out.
Sociography.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes. Then we have the view on reality. The it. Friends, this is where the rubber meets the road. This, I don't know if you know this expression, that is the key. Our beliefs about reality are the key of how we show up. Up to here, we believe that reality consists of separate individuals. And even if we are connected by religion and faith, we're still separate individuals. We're separate. We try to please God. We try to work with spiritual laws or religious laws or secular laws. But there is a sense of separateness. Okay? As we are now finding from scientists, reality looks like separate objects. It's actually a completely interconnected field, energetic field, which vibrates with information and this information is received and emitted throughout the field by every one of us. Okay, there is no empty space between atoms and subparticles. That's quantum physics. I'm not going to go into that now. And also every smaller entity contains the blueprint of the whole, holographic principle. So we now know that reality is essentially a field of consciousness. Now that was something that David Bohm spoke about 80 years ago, when he said in about 1940, I have every reason to believe that consciousness is primary and matter is secondary. Consciousness is primary and matter is secondary. Now notice, friends, isn't that the essence of spiritual teachings? So you may call yourself by different religious names, but at the end of the day, when you're talking about God and spirit, you're talking about the primacy of spirit, the primacy of consciousness. And you're saying that that primacy, how we work with it, defines basically how we show up as humans and what we create, what path we leave behind us. So it's really important that now scientific understanding and spiritual understanding from all the different religious traditions are converging. They're coming together into this understanding of reality is fundamentally conscious. All of reality is fundamentally conscious. All forms of life are forms of consciousness, and the nature of consciousness is to evolve. Whew. I don't have to defend. I don't have to arrive into perfection. No, I don't. The nature of my consciousness and yours and ours is to evolve. All I want to do more and more is show up, be present, and participate, co-lead, co-participate in this evolutionary process, which is what you're doing with this learning. So this, what is real, allows me not to worry about, okay, well, aren't we in competition? Who's going to fund this project? How are we going to distribute the resources? It's all material resources after all. No, I understand that as we are working with the forces of the universe, alignment will attract what's needed. And usually it works that way. So our beliefs about reality also influence decision-making, and the methodology that is grounded in what you see here is so, Nina brought it up yesterday, it is the science of unitive love. We don't have time to talk about that today because we need to get into a little practice, but the science of unitive love is a transdisciplinary understanding that is now emerging. And I will talk more about it in a course that I will be offering at the end, starting on October 18th. It's going to be a virtual course. It's limited to 20 participants, and it is organized by my institute, Integralite Transdisciplinary Institute for Consciousness, Society, and Well-Being. If you go to everything that we're talking about right now, integralite.org, and then to courses, you will see a course on spiritual resilience for the 21st century. Spiritual resilience for the 21st century is going to actually teach these integral skills that we're going to dip our toe in today, just a little bit, okay? The course is going to focus on that. It's going to be a 9-week course, 9 Saturdays for 2 hours. The time is such that it will incorporate people from West Coast, East Coast of the US, Europe, and further east. So you're welcome to register if there are still slots, because the slots are filling very quickly. But I've limited it to 20 because I need to be able to work with each person that is part of this course. But if you want to register, all the information is there. You can pre-register by paying half of the course fee now to reserve your spot, and then the rest when you start. But anyways, that will be a more in-depth experience. I'm calling it spiritual resilience because spiritual integrates scientific and for some of us religious understanding, for some of us just spiritual understanding, depends on who we are, but it really brings together, it's essentially integral. It's integral resilience. What kind of understanding and skills do we need to practice and how do we develop these in order to be resilient in a century of so much geopolitical trouble and instability and insecurity and stress? So that's a little announcement. And based on this understanding of reality and decision-making and methodology of science based on science of unity of love, we also understand the importance of the ecological life. And that's part of how we think about reality. I need to live in a way that is sustainable because that's part of how I show up as a leader. Am I living sustainably and am I embodying sustainable decisions? You know, people talk about all kinds of wonderful spiritual things, and then they go and they take their plastic cups and trays and dump them in the trash. What's spiritual about that? On a planet that already has mountains of trash that are covering the land of poor nations in the developing world. There's nothing spiritual about that, right? But we can claim all kinds of things. So ecological life is part of really understanding the spiritual nature of reality. And based on that, of course, the social skills, that is the way of unity that Nina mentioned yesterday. And when she first mentioned it, it sounded like a nice story, like something oh so nice and utopian, and then the pie in the sky, and da-da-da-da, and what about fascism, and what about this? Well, no, it's a whole new level of social skills that are emerging with the way of unity. So this is a unity view of human socio-historical evolution and processes of unity justice, which I will have to talk about in my course, because there's absolutely no way we can go there now. But these are skills, these are social skills that you will now have to practice. So without further ado, we're going to get into the practice. So here's what we're going to do. We have to break into 4 groups. You can choose what group to be in, but we want them to be relatively equal in size, so use your judgment. One group will represent ordinary citizens of a city. One group will represent business in the city. One group will represent the public authorities of the city, municipality, let's say. And one group will represent civil society, civil social organizations, NGOs. Okay, and we want to consult, first of all, each in our own group on a social problem. And then I hope we will get the time for the 4 groups to come together and start talking across groups, consulting, not debating, on how to solve a problem. And then, of course, Samuel will have the most difficult task, which is to work with everybody online somehow to make it work for them. So, friends, can we choose a problem?
We can put all the online group in civil society group as well.
Okay, all right, sure. Yeah, that's a good idea. What problem shall we choose? Ordinary citizens, civil society, administration, say the municipality, business. Volunteers for business. 1, come on, 2, 3, 1 more, 4. Okay, business. We're gonna have to get up now. So please, everybody, get up. Business, move over here, please, to the right. Volunteers for municipality, for government, for the city government. Raise your hand. 1, 2. City government.
For those of us that are joining virtually, so we have some few points that we said. We understood that in such cases, we have to prepare a template to set up when to clean and all of that. We came to the idea that initially you have to start with an education awareness about telling people the importance of cleaning. We know that cleaning doesn't come with only environmental benefit. It also has some social benefit, moral benefit, and to a large extent, even economical benefit. That was one of the examples that our fellow colleague was saying there, that you can also even gain from recycling, which is economical. So we also understand that the implementation of such exercises sometimes can be very difficult. Therefore, we don't want to have such problems. So we will make sure that supervision is very important, and then we'll ensure leaders to take forth by boosting the morale of the volunteers. Because for civil society, normally you are working with volunteers and they need to be motivated in any form or kind that will keep them still going. We didn't undermine the importance of partnership. Therefore, we considered partnering the traditional leaders, the institutions, any organization that could help in mobilization of volunteers. That will make it very important. So we understood that when we're able to mobilize such people through partnership, we can have a teamwork. There was a point that talked about financial constraint when organizing such programs, because you want to have a general cleanup, which may involve some equipment and some refreshments for the volunteers or some sort of stipends. So we understood that partnering is also institutions that will gain economically from such activity would be a very good idea. And when we're able to come up with such partnership, we'll be able to also measure our impact. And after measuring our impact, we will be able to announce our impact to all partners, and then that will boost the morale or the momentum of everybody who took part in such exercise. The exercise we expect to be very frequent in the early stages, and then as everybody has come about and understood, we'll have a very periodic manner of also going about such exercise. So in brief, that is what we have been able to come up with in such few minutes on our online platform. Thank you.